Welcome back in for some more WCTV content. If you haven't watched before, if you didn't read a title, this is where we talk about everything Waynesburg athletics.
Jacket Sports Weekly, where you can find everything Waynesburg University sports. Tune in every week to our panel as they take a deep dive into Waynesburg sports. We cover everything from football.
Turning around is Isaac Trout. Did he get the feet down? We will wait for the mark. And they call it a touchdown.
To basketball.
Ball. Got it! We're all tied up!
To softball.
Max this one. Left field. Kiss it goodbye!
Stay up to date with all your favorite Waynesburg University sports with us at Jacket Sports Weekly.
We've had plenty of Waynesburg athletics that have happened since the last episode. 2 games for both the women's and men's basketball teams. We also had a wrestling open, and the indoor track and field teams had their first meet of the year. Logan Episcopo joined by none other than Seth Adams. Sir, it's great to be back.
Yes.
It is great to be back. And
Great.
You know why it's even greater? We got a win over Jay this past week. We're going to talk about all that, though. Starting with the women's team, they had their 2 games. Unfortunate loss to the Presidents on the ladies' side, 82-65, and then a loss to the St. Vincent College Bearcats this past Saturday. Talk about the 2 tough losses.
Yeah, they're 0-7 on the year, 0-4 in conference, and they are 10th in the conference right now. W&J, they lost 82-65, and St. Vincent, they lost 69-60. And the team has just been really struggling lately. Joey, who gets more into it later, he does a great job of explaining. But, you know, in the St. Vincent game, 9 for 25 at the free throw line, 28.6 field goal percentage, 26.9 3-point percentage. It's just, they're at a crossroads, bump in the road, any stupid cliche like that you can say. But they're just not doing too hot right now. But Howard, she's been putting up points. She put 15 up in W&J and 10 up against St. Vincent. Friday has been on the bench. She hasn't been starting, but she has had a lot of minutes off the bench. So maybe some good things from her. And Jules Moorbacher, who has been playing very well.
Yeah, this women's team, I wouldn't say it's in the middle of transitioning from, veterans leaving the team to new freshmen in.
Yeah.
They just never had really the upperclassmen to begin with. This year you've got Nika Dansby coming back as a grad. You got Marley Wolf as the senior. Outside of that, it's just a handful of sophomores, freshmen, maybe a couple of juniors on the team. But like you mentioned, not a lot of girls come off the floor. You've got the couple in Friday and Moorbacher that have started seeing more minutes. But Lady Jays, 0-7 to begin the year. Next game will be against Geneva College, and it'll be tomorrow at 5:30. And the Rudy Marusa Fieldhouse should make for a really great game. And on top of that, women's side, unfortunate 0-7 start. But the men's team, this past week, they've had 2 games. First against Jay, getting the win against the Presidents there, and then an unfortunate loss to the St. Vincent Bearcats this past Wednesday.
Yeah, Jay, like a fantastic game they played. They won 72-58. They won. They didn't just barely win. They won. They played outstanding. Even without P.J. Suggs and Jalen Davis, who got tossed right out of the half. McLeod had 24 points. Baker had 21. But the weird thing is about that W&J and Jay game, the next highest person to score was Felberg with 8 points. Those guys were leading it, man. And McLeod was actually 3 points off of his personal best, which he got at Randolph College. But they were down 11 at the half, had 27 fouls on the day, and still ended up winning 72-58. But St. Vincent was kind of a punch in the gut. They were undefeated, St. Vincent. They're 6-0. They're first in the PAC. 74-71 loss. Baker, 16 points. McLeod, Knotts, and Suggs all had 11. 24 fouls, playing very aggressive lately, and 13 for 22 from the free throw line.
It seems like it's a continuous thing when it comes to the loss side. Win side, it seems like they shoot well from the free throw line.
Yeah.
Shoot well from the charity stripe, you're going to win your games. Don't shoot well, you're coming out with these tough losses to Westminster and St. Vincent. But I think the main thing to take from these 2 games is the defensive side of the ball that we saw in the game against the Washington and Jefferson treasurers. Well, I don't even want to call them the Presidents. They're the treasurers at this point. Until they get their win back, that's what they're called, okay?
Let us have our moment.
I think that's what we've seen, though, because this team was known to be one of the top teams in all Division III when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. And I think that game shined the light of what this defense is capable of. Obviously, you allow 74 to St. Vincent, which isn't what you want to do. But again, I think that W&J game shows what the peak, and Michael McKenzie will talk about how well of a performance it was. That is perfect basketball in my eyes for Waynesburg. Shot well from the free throw line.
Yes.
Shot well from three. Just shot well in the paint. I don't think you can have a better game than what they did. So Waynesburg men's team, similar to the women's, their next one will be against Geneva at the Rudy Marisa Fieldhouse to complete the doubleheader. That one begins at 7:30. Now wrestling, we talked about where they would be. We knew they were wrestling one team, but now, Seth, we know what their competition was at this Open.
Yeah, the Storm Open, hosted by Lake Erie College, man. They had Division I, Division II, Division III. For Division I, they had Ohio State, Central Michigan, Buffalo, West Virginia, and Ohio. They had so many of these schools coming here to Lake Erie, which is cool. I love it. But let's talk about Seth Evans, who went 2 for 2 on the day, but he won his first two, 17-0 in a technical fall over Williamton, and 6-3 decision over Evan Reed of Division II, Gannon. So great day for Seth Evans, and Billy Sugden had a heavyweight win as well.
I think that's a big part of why Waynesburg's going to a meet like that. You get to face that really high quality competition. It just makes your guys better. Like Seth Evans went 2-2 on that day, facing kids that are above what the normal level he wrestles at.
Yeah.
I think that just shows that outside of obviously the star Colby Morris, that there are some wrestlers capable of battling well in the PAC and just in D3 in general. But to wrap things up, the indoor track and field teams, they had their first meet of the year. On the men's side, Kai Herbert, he was the highlight on the men's team, 25th in the 60-meter hurdles and 7th in the high jump. And on the women's side of thing, Ella Rochelle, she placed 19th in the triple jump. And I'll have to give a shout out to our producer, Megan Barry. She placed 67th in the shot put there at that meet. And that's all we have. The track and field team won't see anything again until the next year on January 21st, where they will go to Muskingum. But Seth, that's it for our Open.
That's it for our Open.
We get to break things down now really in depth with Joey Cirillo and Michael McKenzie on our next segment. So don't go anywhere. You're watching Jacket Sports Weekly.
You're watching WCTV, where we aim to bring you the best local coverage of what you care about most. Everything from local businesses to hometown sports and the latest weather. We're keeping up to date with what you need to know about issues that affect our campus and our community. We're telling the stories that matter, celebrating our past, our future, and our potential. So tune in for all the latest buzz right here on WCTV Channel 14, Waynesburg.
Welcome into our first segment talking about Waynesburg hoops. It's Joey Cirillo joining Seth and I to talk about the women's team. And Joey, the past two tough games for the Lady Jays. Loss to Washington Jefferson, lose to St. Vincent. We'll start with the W&J game. That's a big rivalry everybody wants to talk about. Now, they only scored 8 points in that third quarter. It seems to continue to be that story of one lackluster quarter for the ladies.
I agree, and I think it's that third quarter there. Against Washington and Jefferson, they had 5 points on that third quarter. Only 5. In that entire quarter of play, you had 5 points. How can you go about doing that? How can you cannot get a win after that? That is for sure, and they did not against Washington and Jefferson. But the big thing is what is causing this problem? We've talked about it for multiple weeks now. We've talked about it outside of the show here. What is causing this problem against this team, basically? Is the third quarter like a god amongst Waynesburg hoops? And it's just, it doesn't like women's basketball in the third quarter. I'm coming down to the point where I've looked at so much stuff. I've looked at so many stats, and it's hard to pinpoint a problem. I think it might be a little bit of maybe it's in halftime, when you're in the halftime locker room, what's that atmosphere like? Is Coach Jones and the other coaches just berating the girls on what they're doing wrong and not really highlighting what they're doing right? And that's getting to them mentally. Is that what's affecting them? Is it maybe because there's no student section, really? A student section at a men's game, we've seen it before. It's there, it's thriving. But at a women's game, it's not really active. But those are kind of things that most people would speculate, maybe get their tinfoil hat on for. But I think the big thing is their shooting. The shooting is not looking great. They're struggling a lot, not just in the third quarter, but in the games in general. I think they need to shapen up a little bit, maybe get some more points from the paint, and they're getting a lot of rebounds. Big team member Jules Moorbacher has started to get more starts and started to get more minutes And she's been getting a lot of rebounds in the against St. Vincent. She had 12 rebounds on the game, and that was the most rebounds she's had so far. So I think that is what they need to get towards in this third quarter of play. But honestly, it's really hard to pinpoint.
So, Joey, we talked a lot about Sam Jones and his rotation over the last couple of weeks, even a little bit before the season even started. Has the rotation gotten any better? Or are they seeing some girls that we haven't seen play a lot recently that are getting some starts? Just give us a rundown of that.
Well, like I said, Jules Moorbacher, she's gotten a lot more time. She's a freshman as well, and she's gotten more time in there. She's a good defensive player. She's not putting up as many points, but she's getting those rebounds down when they're on defense, throwing it up, and she's letting the other ones do the work. She's boxing out, getting those rebounds. So that's been a good help towards them. But another thing is Mia Hankins. She got a season low of 19 minutes starting, or not, she did start, but she had a season low of 19 minutes on the court against St. Vincent, the most recent game for her. Is it something because her production value is not doing well? Maybe. Is it because Coach Jones wants to give her a little bit of a break before Geneva, because Geneva was the first game they won last year? So maybe Coach Jones is looking for a win against Geneva. I don't know. I couldn't tell you because, honestly, it's really, like I said, it's hard to pinpoint at this point. But I think the big thing to look at is their 19-game losing streak here.
And you talked about earlier the shooting for the team. In the St. Vincent game, it was not good whatsoever. From the field, you're 28.6%. From three-point, you're 26.9%. And from the free throw line, you're 36%, 9 for 25. How can the ladies find a way to get out of this slump and get back to shooting well from not only behind the three-point line, but just from the free throw line?
I think it's a big thing about practice. And it sounds strange of me to say, but practice is what's going to make you better. I think practice is what they need to do. Maybe have an entire practice solely on free throw shooting and three-point shooting. Their percentages have not been great. I think their best percentages were against Bethany, which they still lost to, but they had better percentages there. So I think the big thing is if you're going to continue shooting, you need to keep practicing on it. You need to continue to work on it because it's clearly not working. But I think the best thing to do is maybe move from the shooting down to layups. Get in there, get in the paint, continue to do that kind of stuff. That might help you a little bit more.
And you were talking about points in the paint. And in that game against W&J, they had 28 points in the paint compared to W&J's 40. So how do they utilize this and recognize, hey, we need to get more points in the paint? What do they got to do to get more points in the paint? Do they throw to Howard more, who is the taller one in the bottom, or what do you think they should do?
Well, I think the big thing was W&J was a really big and aggressive team. They weren't like Waynesburg. Waynesburg is a little more conservative, a little more slow in pace. But W&J, they were a lot more aggressive. They were a lot more getting into the paint, shoving them in there, getting those layups up, which helped them clearly because they had 40 points. But also Waynesburg was not so far behind. They were still behind, but they were getting there. So I think it's a matter of just this team clearly is having a rough patch. I hope it's a rough patch. And I think that as long as they continue to just work on it, maybe find new players that haven't gotten as much time to get just a different rhythm in, maybe that will hopefully get them to get those rebounds in and slow down the other team defensively as well. But we'll see.
And in the St. Vincent game specifically, Emily Cavassini is a name everybody saw in the box score for the Bearcats. 30 points in the Bearcats' 69-60 win. You have Geneva coming up next with Mia San Nicolas, who is, at the time of recording this, the PAC leading points per game scorer with 22.7 per game. How can Waynesburg avoid having one girl take over a game and, if possible, end up shutting down San Nicolas and maybe coming out with a win?
Well, I think the big thing, you put in the tall girls. You got to get them in there. You have to stop the paint running. You have to stop them from getting in there. Last year, you won against them 89-87. It was still a close game. It was not a blowout. You want to win this game, especially if you're Coach Jones. You want this win. And the biggest thing is that you let up a 30 bomb against St. Vincent, who is one of the better teams. And Geneva got better. So did Waynesburg, but it's clearly not showing as well as Geneva would. But I think the biggest thing is just you got to be defensive. And if you're not going to play defensively, then you just got to step up the offense. You got to keep with that caliber of 22 points a game. You got to find somebody to do that as well. I think that we have a good enough team that can do that. It's just, it hasn't shown yet. So I'm hoping that against Geneva, we'll keep it close defensively. Hopefully we won't have another 30 bomb on our hands, but time will tell.
Are there any players that you think will maybe have a breakout game? Or let's just say we're 7 games in, right? Have there been any players who you think are like highlights that we can continue to look forward to throughout the season? Or do you think it's just like kind of at a low moment?
I think a lot of them are going to do well coming into the season. And as they come back from break, I think they'll do a lot better. I think Moorbacher is one that I've seen get on a lot more. She's had a lot more minutes recently. She's done really well. I talked about her before. She's continuing to do well defensively. I think if she'll get more minutes, hopefully the team will have a new dynamic, a new rhythm that they can get behind. And that, I think, Moorbacher is a main one there, but McFadden and Hankins, I think they just need to find a way that they can bond well. When watching the games, you can see them kind of working together, but a lot of the time it's McFadden just trying to find a play, trying to get down there, and is not really utilizing Hankins. And Hankins might be doing the same thing every now and then with McFadden as well. So I think just finding that bond a little more will help them in this game and coming back for break as well.
Well, Joey, thank you very much for breaking down the women's basketball team with us. January 5th was the last time that the Lady Jays walked out with a win at the Rudy Marisa Fieldhouse. Will it happen tomorrow against Geneva? Find out on the Waynesburg University Sports Network. We'll be right back and have Michael McKenzie at the desk.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. Right now we're going to be talking about some men's hoops with Michael McKenzie. But first, all right, we're going to have some highlights of the big A&J game we played last Wednesday. Now you might be wondering, where's the W? Waynesburg took it. Let's take a look. Those were pretty sweet, weren't they? Anyway, let's talk about some men's hoops. We've got Michael McKenzie with us today. Now, Mike, let's talk about the one thing the key highlight. PJ Suggs, Jalen Davis tossed it right out of the half, all right? Break it down, what happened? Give us the rundown.
So it was just interesting. Washington and Jefferson was trying to put on a lot of full court pressure, and it was something Coach Fucina and the Waynesburg men were expecting to happen. 94 feet, full court pressure the entire game, and then away from the whole scuffle that you just talked about, there was a foul. Jordan McCloy tried to get open. I can't remember the defender's name, but tried to kind of grab McCloy, get a little bit of positioning on him, and then away from the play, I believe it was PJ Suggs was also trying to get open. More contact over there, and then PJ Suggs shoves his defender to the ground, or at least it seemed like he shoved him to the ground. Could have been a flop little Oscar-worthy performance, and obviously it cost PJ Suggs the rest of that game, but that's kind of what happened there, and then things escalated from there. Jalen Davis came in, tried to protect his teammate, and as you would kind of expect him to, but maybe went a little bit overboard with that. That's kind of up for debate whether he went overboard with the protection of his teammate or not. Ended up getting tossed from the game. Cost him about 18 minutes of what was an incredible comeback, an incredible game. But I think that those two getting ejected played a huge part in the energy of Waynesburg. There was a huge shift in energy at that moment because it's still about a 7-point game when those two get ejected. The energy shift at that moment was very noticeable, and I think that that is what sparked the quick comeback for Waynesburg to be able to take that game from Washington and Jefferson.
And you mentioned the comeback. Down 11 at halftime, and Waynesburg goes and drops 51 points in the second half. And as you said, fueled by Suggs and Davis getting ejected, Jordan McLeod, Anton Baker, they showed out. Talk about that big 51 second half performance.
It was a good look to see what Waynesburg can be like at their peak. They were running the offense exactly the way they wanted to. Inside out. I've talked about it for a few weeks. They want to run this inside out. They want to really kind of dominate or manufacture most of their offense in the paint, which they did. 34 of their 72 points coming inside the paint. They want to manufacture most of the offense there. But when they're able to shoot the three ball at the clip that they were able to, Jansen Knott's a couple of threes, but Jordan McLeod, 5 of 10 from 3. They shot 41.67% from three-point range in that second half against Washington and Jefferson. Again, or I should say Washington and Jefferson. I keep forgetting that we took the dub from them on that day. But being able to shoot the three ball at a high clip, but at a high volume as well, that's the added element to being able to work inside out. They were doing it kind of a smaller volume, smaller sample size, but at a high percentage. Against Washington and Jefferson, they really tried to get the volume up there in the second half, needing more points. McLeod and Knotts being the main two that came through for Waynesburg.
No, we've been talking about the free throw percentage and how it's been a little bit of a struggle lately. But in this Washington and Jefferson game, they went 15 for 18. But this was a very aggressive game from both sides. Like Waynesburg had 27 fouls, and they played St. Vincent a couple days ago, and they had 24 fouls. So is this Waynesburg team, is it good that they're aggressive, or do you think they need to maybe calm down a little bit?
I think it's good that they're aggressive. I think that they need to be maybe a little more smart, a little more intelligent with how aggressive that they can get. You know, for a team that wants to dominate in the paint, that wants to control the glass, that wants to control points in the paint, that wants to slow things down and get a little more physical than the opponent, it's exactly what you want to see if you're Coach Fusina. You want to see the physicality. You want to see fouls called. You want to see your team get to the free throw line 18 times and knock down 15 of those shots. But also the 27 fouls for Waynesburg against the Presidents, 24 fouls against St. Vincent a few days ago on Saturday. You want to see your team get aggressive, but at some point when the fouls pile up like that, you got to take a little bit of a step back and start to be more smart with your aggressiveness. And I think that's one of the next steps that this Waynesburg team needs to make to win more games and be atop this conference.
So we talked enough about the and-J game. St. Vincent-wise, it's just another heartbreaking loss for the men's team, 74-71. Second time in conference play that they've lost just by a single basket. Previous one, the Westminster game. But Seth talked about the well-done free throw shooting in the and-J game. Now you come to the St. Vincent game and you shoot poorly, very poorly from the free throw line. Might cost you the game, but you can't pinpoint one thing. How can they really get consistent rather than, oh, great performance this game, but this next game, not so well?
I think that going up against a 6-0 St. Vincent team, undefeated in conference play, I'd say that going toe-to-toe with them for 40 minutes, that is a really good performance for Waynesburg. But the next step to winning those games is not only free throw shooting in clutch time. They shot 59.1% against St. Vincent. Step back from that game against the Presidents where they shot 83.3% from the free throw line. But it's also turnovers late in the game. I want to go over the sequence in the last minute of that game against St. Vincent. 71-68 with 52 seconds left. St. Vincent draws a foul, makes 2 free throws. Next possession for Waynesburg. Turn it over, fast break layup for St. Vincent. Next possession, turnover, St. Vincent takes it down, draws a foul, they get 2 free throws. It's a 3-point game. Waynesburg's got 1 possession left. They turn to their top 3-point shooter, Jordan McLeod, but he's not able to knock it down at the buzzer. But it's those turnovers late in the game. It was kind of the same thing against Westminster, but not to the extent that I think it was in terms of importance against St. Vincent. 2 turnovers with chances to extend the lead, and then the next turnover with a chance to take the lead. Once again, I really think that stopping the fast break for the other team and preventing turnovers, they got dominated in terms of points off of turnovers by St. Vincent. Being able to kind of neutralize that, make that a neutral thing in terms of points off turnovers and fast break points for the opposition, that's the next step for Waynesburg to be able to win these close games against these quality teams like Westminster and St. Vincent.
So I know that early in the polls, Waynesburg was projected very, very low. I believe it was 9th.
Number 9.
Number 9. But anyway, Waynesburg is looking dangerous. Do you think that they're a team that might be feared in the PAC with how they've been doing so far?
So far, I think it's too early to say that teams are going to fear Waynesburg. Some teams may just be dismissing this. Okay, a little bit of a hot start, they'll come back down to earth. I'd like to see it as they're trying their best to send the message to the rest of this conference that they're not going to finish 9th place. They're not that bad of a team. They've got a lot of experience. They got a lot of talent on this team. And this roster is constructed really well with how Coach Fusina wants to run this team to be able to win a lot of games in the PAC. They're 2-2 to start PAC play. I believe it's their second best start since 2015, I want to say. They started 3-1 in conference play a couple of years ago in 2021. That's why it's their second best start. But this team has seen a lot of success early. Despite a couple of tough losses, they had success against 2 really good teams in Westminster and St. Vincent. It's all about taking that next step in winning those games before I think that every other team in the PAC is going to fear this Waynesburg team. But I do think that they've done a great job at sending a message to the rest of the conference that they're going to be able to compete with every other team on a night in, night out basis.
And obviously, the 2 tough losses to Westminster and St. Vincent, you could look at it as Waynesburg being another one of those undefeated PAC teams if they don't have those mental mistakes. Now, their next game coming up is against Geneva, currently 2nd place in the PAC. They're 5-0 in the conference. How can you have a game where you finish and start strong? Not like in the W&J game where you had to put together 51 points in the second half. How can Waynesburg dominate Geneva from start to finish?
It's going to be tough to dominate a team like Geneva. They're really good atop the conference. I believe they're still undefeated if I'm not mistaken. But the way to dominate is to play the way you've been playing. You got to play your style of basketball, which is slow the pace down a little bit, force the defense to be patient and defend 27 seconds of the 30-second shot clock, wear them down, find areas to get your playmakers the ball in the paint, like a PJ Suggs, a Jalen Davis, or an Anton Baker. As the game rolls on, then start to open up the offense and open it up for your shooters like Jordan McCloyd and Jalen Knotts. And at that point, I feel like all you have to do, if your offense is running the way you want it to, you're forcing the defense to be patient and you're getting the looks you want to, you just got to control the glass defensively and prevent fast break points. If Waynesburg can do all of those things, I really feel like they could come away with a key win, a signature win early in the season against Geneva that may start striking fear, like you just said a few minutes ago, in some other teams in the PAC.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for joining us, talking about the men's team. See if they can get it done against Geneva here tomorrow at the Rudy Marusa Fieldhouse. That's going to do it for this episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.